Okay, absolutely. Well, hello everybody. My name is Maria. Maria Ortega. I'm from Entre Trámites. Today I'll be explaining you some things about taxes, social security, and like among other things that we are going to touch during this webinar. Thank you so much to Nicole for this invitation. It's a pleasure being here with you. Um, and providing you knowledge on these things that can be a lot of overwhelming, but it's very important for you to know and to understand a little bit how this works. So I'm part of the team of ET Advisory in Entre Trámites. And currently we're doing this kind of webinars. We specialize in taxes, advisory, and all those things. So yeah, this is who I am. So, perfect. So today we're going to talk about the presentation is understanding taxes and social security for Spain-based workers. Um, so, there are two ways of working in Spain as a self-employed or as an employee. Technically, these are kind of the general ways of working. And the main difference between one or another is the way you're going to work. So, for example, as a self-employed, you are an independent person who just take care of their work, works independently. You invoice your clients directly, and you are responsible of your own social security, taxes, VAT, and like other things. Um, there are pros as well when you work as a freelancer, as a self-employed person, that it's that you have your own flexibility, that you can organize your time, your income, and that, yeah, this is like the most common used way of working when you are a freelancer. But as well, you have another option that it's being an employee. As we know, the employees are hired by a company. You have a relationship with your employer. That means that you are going to receive a fixed salary and employment benefits. In these employment benefits can be, for example, vacation, unemployment benefits, social security payments, among like all the other things that you can imagine when you work in a company. Mm, Here, the one that it's in charge of doing your taxes and doing your retentions, paying your social security, um, it's going to be the company, not yourself, as in the case of the self-employed persons. Um, and you have to bound to the conditions of your employer, because it's a contract where you're like offering your services and working for your company or your employer. So that's kind of how this works. um, in terms of taxes and the general taxation, how this works, and mainly what you would have to do, depends on your situation. So if you are an employee, the payments that you are going to have to do, that technically you do not do it by yourself, your company does them for you. It's pay the social security and pay the progressive income tax. Mm, this is taking in the payroll. Your employer, it's going to retain a percentage of your salary in order to pay your social security and your taxes. And those are going to be the main obligations of you as an employee in terms of the taxes. Of course, in Spain, there are a lot of other things for you to declare. But these are kind of the general things. After a few more slides, I'm going to explain you some other obligations that you might have. But this is not related with your work itself, but like you as a person and your assets and like other things. On the other hand, if you are a self-employed person, your obligations are going to be a little bit more than the ones that you have as an employee. So you would have to pay again Social Security and the income tax, but as well, you would have to do quarterly declarations and annual taxes, that it's like a yearly tax as well for being a self-employed person, as well as the VAT. The VAT is something you must take into account when you are a freelancer, a self-employed person, because that's something that the tax agency usually requests, and that has to be done in the quarterly declarations and the yearly declarations as well. So we're going to talk about the personal income tax, or the income tax declaration that you know that every single person in Spain must do. This is something you need to do every year. And you do it in the months of April, May, or June. You have like those 3 months for doing the income tax declaration every year if you are a tax resident in Spain. If you are not a tax resident, then, but if you have, for example, interest, economic interest, or for example, you have worked during that period of time, let's say you live in Spain during less than 183 days in a year in Spain, but you did work or you had investments, or for example, you have a house of which you receive income, something like that, then you need to do a declaration, but as a non-tax resident, that is done on January of the following year. And you declare in this, well, in the declaration as a non-tax resident, you declare just what you receive in Spain, and that's it. And that would be the basic income, that it's the tax return that only includes the income earned within Spain. But when you are a tax resident, means that you have spent more than 183 days in Spain, you have worked, you have lived, or your family lives in Spain, you have interest in Spain, then you need to do the income tax declaration. That was the one that I was telling you that was done on the months of April, May, and June. And in that, you need to include your basic income plus your international income. The international income basically means that the whole money that you have earned in the whole wide world, you will need to declare that to Spain. There is one thing that I like to do a little clarification on, that it's not necessarily declaring, it's paying. You can declare, but not pay. There are some treaties in Spain to avoid double taxation. So you have to make sure that you have not paid those taxes in another country, or if you have paid already for that international income, you can just like tell the tax agency and use these treaties. Of course, check if the country where you paid your taxes has this treaty or not. But if they do, just tell like the tax agency, like, look, I have already paid my taxes in the other country, so give me a tax credit or something like that to reduce my taxes. But still, everything needs to be declared in Spain. So, as I was telling you, the income and assets tax declaration dates are on the months of April, May, and June. But there are some times and some days that you need to be aware of. That is that your taxes are declared on the following year. So, for example, this 2025, we are going to declare the income that you received in 2024. And the tax agency has different dates. So, for example, for filing online your taxes for the income tax declaration of 2024, it would be from the April 2nd until June 30, 2025. For doing it by telephone, you have from May 6th to June 30. But for doing it by telephone, you need to, before this, call and schedule an appointment. These appointments are taking from the 29th April until June 27th. And if you want to do it by yourself in person, like going to a tax agency office or something like that, you have from June 2 until June 30. And again, in this situation, you need to do some appointments. And these appointments are taken and scheduled from May 29 to June 27. So just in case, you have three options for doing your declaration. You can do it online, by phone, or in person. It's totally up to you, but there are some dates you need to be aware of and just check just in case. So as I was telling you, there are some other declarations and taxes that you must be aware of. The ones that I told you previously are the ones that yes or yes you need to do, regardless if you are self-employed, if you are employee, or if you are just living on your savings. Sometimes it's recommended to do these declarations. I mean, every case is different, but this is kind of the general um, overview on how it is. Um, but there are some other things that you must be aware of and take into account, depending your situation, depending how much money you earn or your type of assets, for example. And one of these is the Modelo 720. This Modelo 720, it's a declaration that the tax agency and the Spanish government requires you to do when you accomplish some requirements in terms of your assets. Basically, this is an informative declaration that it's going to let the tax agency knows your assets can be in Spain or worldwide, and this is going to include bank accounts, securities, real estate, insurance, like all the things that you have that belong to your assets and increase like the amount of money that you have must be declared to Spain. This modelo must be filed in the first months of the year, and you have until March 31st for doing this declaration. Um, Basically, what you would need to declare when you will need to declare this modelo is when you fulfill certain requirements. So the Spanish tax agency has like organized three different categories that if you accomplish one of these, then you would need to submit this model. Um, so for example, if you have in your bank accounts the total balance that exceeds 50,000 euros, then you need to do this declaration. If you have, for example, securities, collective investment schemes, such as, for example, pension funds, that you know the pensions are not treated in Spain as pension, as a saving, but as a source of income. So if you have any source of income like this, investments or something like that, that exceed again 50,000 euros, you will need to declare it. Or the third option is if in your real estates and interest in real estates you have more than 50,000 euros, you need to do a declaration. Again, this declaration is just informative. So you would need just to tell the Spanish government, look, I have this, and this is just done for mainly transparency with the tax agency for them to know how much things you have, and a little bit for the wealth tax, and just to know how much money you have, where do you have it, and that's it. So now we are going to talk about the Social Security for employees versus self-employed. There is difference between this social security in terms of the benefits, but as well in terms of who is the responsible of paying the social security, how it's managed, and of course, how much you're going to pay. So every single person who works in Spain has to have a tax ID number, that this is the one that you're going to use for paying your taxes and paying your social security as well. So if you're an employee, the good thing is that you're going to share your contributions to the social security with your company or with your employer. That means that it's not going to be only a responsibility of you, or that you're going to pay it like 100%, but your company, it's going to take care of paying a little bit of this contribution. So when you're employed, you are going to contribute to the Spanish tax agency and social security to be covered in certain things, such as unemployment benefits, coverage for work, for sickness or injury, uh, can be work sickness or injury, or like normal sickness or injury, maternity and paternity care and leave, public health care, and retirement and pension. When you are an employee, you pay 6.5% of your salary for the social security, and your employer pays the rest, that it's going to be 32%. For example, if you are an employer that it's going to pay, for example, your employee 100 euros, that means that you're going to pay 70.83 euros as salary to your employee, and then the rest is going to go to the social security contributions, because you would have to pay for the rest. On the other side, if you are self-employed, that means that you would have to pay your social security on your own. It's a full responsibility of you to do it, and this is a must. The Spanish government requires that you do these payments by yourself, and it's a must. Mm, you can choose the level of contributions that you are going to do. So you can choose between certain frames and rates that you can, yeah, like move between them in order to do these contributions to the social security. Mm, and most autonomous, most self-employed people decide to choose the minimum because, of course, it's going to be more tax efficient on the job, on their income. So that's the way it's done. But you can choose however you want to do it, depending the income you receive. Um, you can get the same benefits as an employee, but some of them are harder to get because they are going to request sometimes that you have paid the social security during certain amount of time or certain minimum, something like that. So they're a little bit more difficult to get than if you're an employee, but still you are going to get it. So for example, you can get inactivity benefits, that it's same as the unemployment benefits, the coverage for work-related sickness or injury, or benefits for non-work related illness, injury, maternity and paternity care, that this is going to be a little bit lower than when you are an employee. The public health care, this is the same, or retirement and pension, again, a little bit lower than when you're an employee. Mm, and the social security, right now, if you are a new freelancer or self-employed or autónomo, how it's called in Spain, you can apply to something called the flat rate in social security. This is something that it's going to give you a benefit of paying just 87, around 87 euros monthly for the first year of your activity. And after that, you might pay between 230 until like 620 a month, depending the income you receive and depending how much you want to pay and choose how much to pay. Mm, so this is like some tables that we have on how much it would be to have an employee, how much it would be to be a freelancer. Around in Social Security, it's like an estimated on how much it would cost or how much taxes you will need to pay, to just in case. And well, now we're going to talk about the self-employed, because when you are self-employed, as I was telling you at the beginning, you have some obligations that are needed to be fulfilled when you are registered as autonomous. So, for example, there are some common mistakes that the autonomous do when they're just starting. That it's, for example, misunderstanding the deductible expenses. As autonomous, you can deduct as many things as you want regarding your job, as long as you can connect it with your job, with your work. You can include them as an expenses. There is another mistake that it's the incorrectly categorizing income. So, for example, sometimes people are not sure how they have to invoice their clients, or, for example, when an income it's international, when it's the Spanish income, the basic income. So that's another thing. Not keeping proper records. This is another mistake that it's done in the cases that you have like a lot of things, a lot of invoices, a lot of expenses. So this is another thing. And ignoring the tax deadlines, that this is a very, very important thing. You must know when you have to file your taxes, because this is something the tax agency is very strict with. They tend to be very hard on the deadlines. So this is an important thing. And sometimes the failure to seek professional advice. Sometimes there are some people who offer this type of webinars, answer questions. So it's important for you to know all those things, because you know the Spanish system can be a little bit complex, a little bit strict. So it's very important for you to know that. And as I was telling you, the taxation overview of the self-employed, the autonomous, are the income tax, the VAT, the quarterly taxes, and the annual taxes. These are the main obligations you would have to do as autonomous. And we are going to talk about the VAT. The VAT depends the activity you do. The general VAT, it's going to be 21%. This is the one that it's going to be applicable to most activities. But if you have, for example, a restaurant, a bar, a hotel, art, you are going to have to charge on your invoices the 10%. There is also a super reduced rate, that it's the 4% of the VAT for the pharmaceuticals or newspapers. There is a 0% of VAT for the exportations. And there it's an exempt. That means that you wouldn't need to do this declaration for the transport, healthcare, and education. Um, the dates of the quarterly declarations, as I was telling you, are very strict, and you have 4 dates of the year where you need to do this. The first quarter, it's going to be from April 1st until April 20. In all these quarters, you declare the previous 3 months of your income. So, for example, January, February, and March are declared in April, and so it goes. The second quarter, it's going to be from July 1st to July 20. Then the third quarter, it's going to be from October 1st to October 20. And the fourth quarter, it's going to be from January 1st to January 30 of the following year. Those are the dates that you need to be very careful with. There is another option for you to work as a self-employed, not necessarily being autónomo, that it's create an SL. This is a limited company. It's the most common one. And this is used for the small entrepreneurs who receive a little bit more income than the autónomo. And this is going to help them optimize a little bit their taxes. These companies basically can have one or more shareholders. You can create it how you want. It's limited liability. So you're going to protect your assets, your personal assets from the company. As I was telling you, it is a good option if you exceed more than 60,000 euros a year for you to optimize your taxes. But you are going to be subject to corporate tax, and perhaps you are going to distribute your earnings, one part as dividends, another part as salary. But it will give you more benefits in terms of taxes and, reputation, access to bank loans, and like other things. It will give you as well a more professional image, but you are going to have to require to maintain more records, do a little bit more of paperwork. And the process right now takes a little bit more than these 30 days. We are now having a little bit trouble with the CIRSE, that it was like the platform where we did like all the things in Spain online. Right now it's taking a little bit more. So this is one thing we'd like to know, because everything now must be done with the notary, and that takes a little bit more. Just in case you're planning to do and create your SL, we recommend doing it on time in order to have like everything ready. And of course, the accounting plans, the historia, it's a little bit more increased than being an autónomo. It can start at 117 euros per month to have like all your paperwork ready and do like all of that. The tax obligations for these companies are the same, with an extra, that it's the corporate tax, the informative returns, and the payments for the social security and the income tax. And as I was telling you, you can deduct all the things related with your work. So here we have some examples for the autonomous or self-employed, and for the companies, the limited liability companies, just in case. The only thing that you need to be aware of this is that you will need to have all these expenses under your name or your company's name in order to have everything ready and deduct this from your income. This is a general overview of the taxes. So I think I finished, and now it's time for Nicole. Thank you so much for this thing. Here we have our QR code, just in case. But now I'm going to pass it to Nicole so she can continue.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was really interesting. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to start by very briefly introducing myself and explain what I do and explain the company that I work for. So just some background information about myself. I used to be a financial advisor in the UK for 8 years, and I've been in Spain now for 10 years, also working as a financial advisor. So I predominantly help expatriates who are living in Spain with their financial planning, or people who are looking to move to Spain. Lots of people I speak to are from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada. So I can basically help any non-Americans move to Spain, and I'll explain that in a second. So I'm a private wealth manager or a financial advisor for a company called Chase Buchanan. I'll explain more about them on the next slide. And Chase Buchanan, they're a global and independent company. So as an entity, we help expatriates move abroad from where they are now into their chosen country, predominantly in Europe. I specialize only in Spain. And I'm very much a cross-border financial advisor. So getting people out of where they are now into Spain in the most tax-efficient way by creating a very clear strategy. And as I say, individuals who are already here. So myself and Chase Buchanan, these are the main areas that we specialize in. So it's setting up investments to help reduce taxation in Spain, overall financial planning and strategy. So that just means understanding where someone currently is and understanding where they would like to be financially and creating a strategy to bridge that gap to get them from where they are now to where they would like to be. Retirement planning as well. So discussing pensions and provision for later in life and retirement and how to get there. For people that are British or have worked in the UK and have UK private pensions, as and when and if it's appropriate, I also provide advice to transfer those pensions so that they can continue to have financial advice in Spain. And there's been a whole raft of changes and the goalposts keep moving in that space. But I provide advice on those pension transfers if it's relevant. If anyone is American or if they're connected to the US, because of US strict regulations, I can't give financial advice. However, at Chase Buchanan, we have a team of individuals who are qualified and regulated between the US and Europe, which is quite hard to find for financial advice. So I myself can't help, but as a company, we certainly specialize in US connected individuals. So I thought I'd just put together just some very typical conversations that I have with people, which is very, very varied. And the first one is people saying, I would like to invest. And sometimes they're ready to invest, but sometimes from a financial planning perspective, they're perhaps not quite ready yet, but they've not realized that. So for example, they might not have emergency cash reserves just saved in the bank in case they need it. They might not have an appropriate time horizon of investing, which really for medium to long-term investing, you need 5 years or more. Or they might have short-term high interest debt, for example, which actually they're probably better placed repaying that before they consider investing. So that's quite a typical conversation I have. Also, just general financial planning for people that have quite an international lifestyle. I speak to so many different nationalities of individuals in Spain, and people will say, look, I've got this bank account here and this pension here and this investment there, and it just all feels really messy. I plan to stay in Spain for the medium to long term, but then I don't know what I'm doing. And so creating a strategy and consolidating if it's necessary for those sorts of situations. Quite often I'm approached when people actually need an accountant or a tax advisor more than myself. So just talking through the differences between what I do and what an accountant does, because we overlap a lot, but we work in very distinct and different spaces. So I'm not a tax advisor. I create an overall strategy for tax planning, which sounds quite similar. And I'm very much more focused on investments and pensions. But if somebody said, look, if I live in Spain, what's my personal tax liability going to be? Or if I set myself up as a company, what do I need to consider for taxation? Or how are these assets or investments taxed in Spain? I can give generic information, but you're a much better place to speak to somebody like Maria and the team if it's more about personal or business related taxation. So I can always point you in the right direction. And then another main conversation is, okay, I live in Spain. I want to invest. I've got excess cash in the bank. I'm ready to invest. Everything else is in alignment. What makes sense here? Because there's a lot of investments that don't make sense from a Spanish tax point of view, and there's quite a narrow offering as to what does make sense. So a lot of conversations around that with Spanish resident individuals. And I also speak to a lot of people that are on the Beckham Law, which is quite an attractive tax incentive for the first 6 years of individuals moving to Spain when they meet certain requirements. So if that is the case, then their investment planning is very, very different to somebody that doesn't have that. Because if you're under the Beckham Law, essentially you're treated as non-tax resident in Spain for the duration of it. So you don't need investments to help reduce and minimize tax because the Beckham Law is already doing that for you. So the investment conversation of somebody on Beckham Law that doesn't have it is very different, and there's great investment options for both. I also speak to people that are worried about their pension provisions. So they might say, look, I've been here, there, and everywhere. I've jumped around a bit with countries or jobs. I'm worried about a lack of pension provision later in life. What do I do? So lots of those conversations as well. Also, I mentioned before, people that have built up UK pensions. It's a very delicate space now, but if it's appropriate, I can transfer those, keep them within the UK, but transfer them into something that's more international so they can continue to receive advice in Spain. And just also on the pension front, a lot of conversations I have are, I've got pensions in the UK or in Australia, but I don't really have anything in Spain, and I'm worried that I'm lacking pension provision. I'm not really actively saving like I used to in my home country. What can I do? So it's a case of setting up an investment which isn't a traditional pension, but it's earmarked as a pension for later in life. So at the end of the day, it serves the same purpose of an investment for an income later in life, but it's much more flexible and accessible than a traditional pension. So there are other good dynamic options out there. So I have a lot of those conversations as well. It's a very typical one for people that have lived in different countries and they feel that their savings isn't enough for retirement. And also the final one, a common conversation is, should I buy an investment property or should I invest in something else? What's the options? What are the pros and cons of an investment property versus a stock market type of investment? So those sorts of conversations, because I mean, a lot of it is down to personal preference, but there's some really distinct differences between those two styles of investment. So I thought that might be interesting for you to explain that more about what I do and the types of conversations that I have with people. So just going back to the Beckham Law, because since the digital nomad visa was introduced in Spain, and the Beckham Law has been sort of reinvented around the same time, it's a lot more common now that people have it. So if you are in Spain and you have the Beckham Law, as I said before, you don't need to focus on an investment that's reducing tax because that's done for you anyway. So the investment would be as cheap as possible, basically, because you don't need anything overly sophisticated from a tax point of view. And you can take advantage of our investment management approach. We have investment options that are very high investor protection limits, multi-currency, very flexible. And when someone is nearing the end of Beckham Law, we would close that investment and reinvest it into something then that is much more efficient with the Spanish tax system. So there's a whole strategy there in place for those individuals. And if somebody is a normal Spanish taxpayer, so they're not on the Beckham Law, then we have some fantastic investment solutions there as well. Because as I said before, it's a very narrow offering as to what makes good tax sense in Spain. So these investments are based in Europe, extremely high investor protection limits again. They optimize tax, which just means they reduce tax, reducing income tax, reducing capital gains tax. They can help reduce wealth tax and succession tax eventually as well. Again, they're multi-currency, super easy to report in Spain because they're transparent and tax compliant, which means they're known, understood, and liked and approved by the Spanish tax authorities. They help facilitate estate planning, so legacy planning, what happens when you pass away. And again, you have access to our investment management approach, which just means how is the cash being invested? What do the funds look like? And what's the approach there? So that's my contact details with the QR code. You're very welcome to contact me if you would just like an initial, no obligation, complimentary discussion about financial planning or investment options in Spain. So thank you very much from me.